She's been faking that limp for years to live off the state, my mother said into the banquet room microphone, and 38 people at the graduation lunch went quiet. 2 weeks later, my disability benefits were cut off, my transportation approval was flagged, and I got a repayment notice demanding $8,916 back. My own parents had sent in a false fraud report with edited photos, fake timelines, and a typed statement saying I ran 5-kilometer races and worked under the table. Then, 11 months later, a county investigator I had never met walked into a church fundraiser and read one sentence out loud, and my mother's face changed in a way I had never seen before. My name is Nicole Harper Bennett. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to the Riverside Convention Center in Cedar Falls, Iowa, on Saturday, May 18, 2024. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. I had graduated that morning from the respiratory therapy program at Hawthorne Community College. The ceremony itself had gone fine, better than fine, actually. My white cap kept slipping because the bobby pins were cheap. The gown smelled faintly like dry cleaning chemicals and someone else's perfume, and my right hip was throbbing the way it always did after more than an hour in a hard folding chair. But I had made it. I walked with my cane that day. That matters. Not because I use it every second of every day. I do not. But because I have a connective tissue condition and nerve damage from a crash when I was 19. And on bad days, my right leg drags a little, especially after stairs or standing too long. I had been approved for a modest state disability benefit while I finished school because my work hours were inconsistent. My mobility was documented, and my doctor, Dr. Melissa Kwan, had filled out every form twice because the county always wanted one more box checked. My mother knew all of this. My father knew all of this. They had sat in the orthopedic waiting room on East San Martin Drive with me in August of 2021 while I got imaging done. They had driven me to physical therapy on Ridgeway Avenue 6 times before they got bored of doing it and started sighing every time I asked. They knew exactly what was real because they had watched it happen. After the ceremony, we went across town for lunch in a smaller banquet room with beige walls, fake ivy around a mirror, and that thick carpet that always smells like coffee grounds and carpet cleaner. There were 38 people there, my Aunt Denise and her husband, my cousin Mariah, 3 girls from my cohort, my clinical supervisor, Jenna Rios, my neighbor Mrs. Holcomb from apartment 3B, my parents' pastor and his wife. A lot of people who had no business hearing what they were about to hear. I should tell you something important about my mother, Elaine Bennett. She is not a screamer. She is the kind of woman who uses a calm voice the way some people use a blade. She smiles when she lies because she thinks that makes it truth. People like her because she sends thank you cards and remembers birthdays and can stand in a church kitchen with a foil pan of baked ziti and look like decency itself. My father, Martin Bennett, is quieter. He lets her go first, then he confirms that was their system my whole life. At 1:26 in the afternoon, after the sheet cake had been cut and while everyone was still balancing paper plates and sweating glasses of iced tea, my mother tapped a spoon against the side of her water goblet and asked for the microphone the banquet manager had left for family remarks. She said she wanted to say a few words about how proud she was. That should have warned me. She started soft. Nicole has always had to do things in her own way. A few people smiled. She has always needed a lot of support. My father nodded from his chair, and despite some confusion over the years, we are pleased she has finished. I remember the hum from the ceiling vent. I remember the lemon smell from the furniture polish. I remember my cane leaning against the edge of my chair, the rubber tip leaving a tiny black mark on the carpet. Then my mother looked directly at my clinical supervisor and said, "We are hoping that now she has this credential, she will no longer feel the need to exaggerate medical issues for attention and state money." The room went flat. I heard someone put down a fork. My cousin Mariah said, "Aunt Elaine," but my mother kept going, controlled, practiced. She has been faking that limp for years to live off the state. We did not want to ruin her day, but honesty matters. We have seen her dance at weddings, carry laundry baskets, and walk perfectly normally when it suits her. 38 people, silent. My father added, without looking at me, "There are photographs. That was the first betrayal, not the report. The rehearsal of it, the confidence, the fact that they had clearly discussed wording. I did not stand up and scream. I did not cry. I did not explain my body to a room full of people with chicken piccata on their plates. I picked up my phone. I opened notes. I typed the time, 1:27 p.m. I typed exactly what she said. Then I pressed record and set my phone face down beside my napkin. That is the kind of daughter they raised. Not obedient. Careful. My clinical supervisor, Jenna, was the one who broke the silence. "Elaine, this is not appropriate." My mother gave her a small, sad smile. "Jenna, you work in healthcare. You understand how often systems are manipulated." It was such a precise sentence, built to make anyone who challenged her feel naive. I said, "I'm leaving." My father finally looked at me. "Nicole, if you walk out now, you will make this look worse." I remember thinking, worse than what? I stood up, my hip locking for a second, and that tiny involuntary hesitation was almost funny to me. Even then, even after what she had said, my body was still giving evidence. Mrs. Holcomb from my building reached for my purse before I could forget it on the chair. She squeezed my hand once and whispered, "Go," so I did. Outside, the air smelled like hot pavement and cut grass. I sat in my 12-year-old blue Hyundai Elantra with the engine off and read my own note 3 times to make sure I had every word right. Then I sent myself a voice memo from the recording app. Then I texted Jenna. "Did you hear exactly what she said?" Jenna wrote back in less than a minute. "Yes, I'm so sorry. If you need me to write it down, I will. I saved that too." If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change, not in a dramatic movie way, but in the administrative way, the paperwork way, the Monday morning way, then you know what happened next. I was not thinking about my feelings yet. I was thinking about records, and 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday at 4:12 p.m., the first official envelope arrived. If this story is hitting somewhere familiar, subscribe now. The women who survive this kind of thing usually do it by noticing details. The envelope came from Blackhawk County Disability Support Services, white window envelope, metered postage, my name typed correctly, which almost made it feel respectful. Inside was a notice that my case had been placed under fraud review pending investigation of a complaint, that I had misrepresented ambulatory limitations and income status. My benefits were suspended immediately. My transportation eligibility through Cedar Valley Mobility Access would also be reviewed. If the complaint was substantiated, I could be responsible for overpayment recovery, totaling $8,916. I was standing at my kitchen counter when I read it. The apartment smelled like onions because I had just started a pan for dinner and forgotten them. The smoke detector chirped once while I was reading the second paragraph. I turned off the burner and sat on the floor with the letter in my hand. $8,916. My monthly benefit was $1,486. It covered rent on my one-bedroom on West 4th Street, my co-payments, the gap when clinic shifts were too painful to stack, and the rides on days I could not drive safely after treatment. It was not luxury money, it was survival money. They had not just tried to humiliate me, they had gone after oxygen. Rent, medication, time. At 4:26 p.m., I called the number on the letter. The caseworker who answered was named Candace Weller. She sounded tired in the way public employees often do at the end of a Tuesday. Not cruel, just already carrying too much, she said. "Miss Bennett, I can confirm there was a third-party fraud complaint submitted on May 21st. The review unit has your case," I asked. "Can you tell me what was submitted?" She said. "I can send you a copy of your file request form," I said. "Please send it today." She did. By 5:10 p.m., I had printed the request at the UPS store on University Avenue because my home printer liked to jam when I was upset. By 5:34, I had scanned and emailed it back with a subject line that read, "Full file request, urgent, fraud allegation." Then I started a folder on my laptop called May 2024. Inside May 2024, I created subfolders: graduation audio, texts, medical benefits, photos, witnesses, parents. I had been keeping folders on my life since I was 19 because being chronically ill teaches you very quickly that memory is not enough. The date matters, the wording matters, which office you spoke to matters. The woman at window 3 versus the man at extension 217 matters. That night, I called my Aunt Denise. She is my mother's younger sister. 61 years old, retired elementary school secretary, lives in Waverly with a screened porch full of geraniums and a memory like a steel trap. She had been at the lunch. She had also been one of the people who stayed silent while it was happening. That matters too. When she answered, she said, "I have been waiting for your call." I said, "Did you know they were going to do this?" Silence. Then the sound of ice hitting glass. "Not exactly," she said. "Your mother told me on Thursday that she was tired of supporting your performance. I thought she meant emotionally. I did not know she meant she had sent paperwork." I asked. She said, "Paperwork." She said, "And I remember this because it made me uncomfortable." She said, "Once the state sees what we sent, this nonsense will stop." I wrote that down. My aunt started crying quietly, the way some women cry when they are ashamed of themselves. "Nicole, I am sorry I did not call you sooner." I said, "Can you text me exactly what you remember?" She did. At 7:14 p.m., I screenshot it and saved it in Witnesses. Then I called my friend Tessa Morgan. Tessa is not a lawyer. She is a compliance coordinator for a rehab network in Des Moines, which means she spends her entire life thinking about records, dates, access logs, authorization forms, and how stupid people become the moment they think no one will check. She had known me since sophomore year of high school, back when we both worked at a frozen yogurt place in the Cedar Falls strip mall and thought $20 in tips meant we were rich. She listened to me without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not argue with them. Do not call your parents. Pull the file, get every piece of medical documentation from the last 3 years. Ask for the source materials, not just the summary. If they sent pictures, you want copies, not descriptions." I said, "What if they already made the decision?" She said, "Then you build the packet they should have had before they listened to idiots." That is what I did. Now let me take you back to Friday, May 24th at 9:40 in the morning, to the records office at St. Luke's Outpatient Ortho on Kimball Avenue. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and stale cinnamon rolls from a break room nearby. A daytime talk show was playing with the volume too low to understand. I asked for everything: imaging reports, functional assessments, physical therapy attendance, specialist notes, mobility evaluations, every after-visit summary from Dr. Kwan and from neurology. I paid $83.40 in copying and records fees because some systems still charge like it is 1998. The records clerk, a woman named Jolene with silver hoop earrings and pink reading glasses on a chain, looked at the fraud notice I had folded in my purse and said, "You need dates on every page. Make them make sense in a stack." That sentence helped me more than she knew. So I made them make sense in a stack. I spent Memorial Day weekend at my dining table with color tabs, highlighters, and a legal pad from Dollar General. Blue for medical, green for income, yellow for witnesses, pink for false claims. I built a timeline from the date of my accident, October 9th, 2021, through the date of the fraud report, May 21st, 2024. I also requested the surveillance footage from the graduation lunch venue, not because I expected miracles, but because I wanted proof of the speech and of me leaving with my cane. The banquet manager, a man named Ross Bender, said the audio would be useless, but the room cameras covered the podium and exits. He charged me $25 for a USB drive and told me footage older than 30 days auto-deleted. Again, dates mattered. 3 days later, on Wednesday, May 29th, at 11:08 a.m., I got an email from the County Review Unit with a secure link to the complaint file. I clicked it standing up, then I sat down. The complaint was 7 pages long. It had been filed anonymously, but not really. People who want to destroy you always leave fingerprints in the phrasing. It said I had demonstrated normal gait at multiple social functions. It said I carried box decorations into a church hall without visible impairment. It said I performed dance movements at cousin's wedding in September 2023. It said I had boasted to relatives that disability money made it easier to work less and spend more. Attached were 6 photos. One was me holding a folding chair at my cousin Mariah's bridal shower. The date stamp was missing, but I remembered that day because I had left early with ice on my hip. One was me at my friend Kylie's wedding with my cane set against the table while I stood for a picture. One was me getting out of my own car with groceries. One was a screenshot from an old Instagram story of me swaying in place with 3 other bridesmaids while Dancing Queen played. One was me carrying 2 paper bags from Trader Joe's. One was me at church in low heels taken from the side. Normal life, presented as fraud. There was also a typed witness statement signed, apparently by concerned family friend. It said I had run a local 5-kilometer race in April. I had not. It said I regularly cleaned houses for cash. I did not. It said I admitted my cane was for sympathy. That one was almost elegant in its cruelty because it took 1,000 little humiliations disabled women already deal with and condensed them into one lie. At the bottom, there was a sentence that made my hands go cold. Her mother, Elaine Bennett, has privately expressed concern for years that Nicole manipulates providers. So there it was, anonymous, signed by no one. But my mother had quoted herself into the document. I did not call her. I did not send a rage text. Instead, I zoomed in. The PDF properties showed it had been created on May 21st at 8:16 p.m. The attached photos still contained metadata on 2 files, and one had been exported from an iPhone registered to Elaine Bennett's Apple ID display name. Not legal proof all by itself, but enough to point a direction. I emailed the review unit back requesting all original attachments in native format, not compressed PDF copies. Tessa texted me 3 words. Good. Make them work. If you have ever had family members lie in that soft, reasonable voice that makes everybody else feel rude for noticing, you know how isolating this part is. It is not just the lie, it is the confidence. But confidence leaves records too, and the next record was the one that cracked the whole thing open. On Monday, June 3rd at 2:19 p.m., I got a voicemail from my church friend Hannah Price. Hannah was 29, choir alto, mother of twins, and one of those women who always knows the temperature of a room before anyone else. She had heard my mother talking after service. Her voicemail said, "Hey Nicole, call me back when you can. I think your mom said something to Mrs. Albright from County Intake and it sounded wrong." Mrs. Albright was not just any church woman, she worked part-time in benefits intake for the county. Not in the fraud unit itself, but close enough that my stomach dropped when Hannah said her name. I called her back from my car in the Walgreens parking lot. Hannah said she had been stacking casserole dishes in the church kitchen on Sunday when she heard my mother telling Mrs. Albright, "It is hard when your own child learns to work a system. We sent photographs. We only want what is truthful." Then Hannah had heard Mrs. Albright say, "Elaine, you should not be discussing that with me here." I asked Hannah, "Will you write that down?" She said, "I already did." I got her typed statement by 6 p.m. That same evening, I sent a calm email to the county review address asking whether any staff member outside the review unit had discussed my case with the reporting party in a non-official setting. I did not accuse. I asked the next morning at 8:42 a.m. A supervisor named Laura Menendez called me back. She said, "Miss Bennett, I cannot discuss personnel matters, but I can tell you your concern has been forwarded." That was county language for "we heard you." By then I had missed 2 clinic shifts because I was on the phone with offices instead of sleeping. My rent for June was paid, barely from savings. My July rent was not. I sold a gold chain my grandmother gave me for $190 and hated myself for needing to. I started measuring groceries by what could stretch 4 days. Eggs, rice, bananas, generic Greek yogurt. I kept the air conditioning at 78 because I was afraid of the electric bill. People who have never had paperwork used against them think the worst part is the accusation. It is not. It is the interruption, the way your life becomes 10 small emergencies before breakfast. My father called on Thursday, June 6th, at 7:16 p.m. I almost did not answer. Then I did, because sometimes you need people to keep talking so you can hear how far they will go. He said, "Your mother is concerned you are making this adversarial." I said, "You filed a false report." He corrected me instantly. "We raised concerns. I said nothing." He continued, "If your condition is legitimate, then the review will clear you. You are acting guilty." That sentence, so many of you listening have heard some version of it. They set a fire and then criticize your breathing. I said, "Do not call me unless it is in writing." Then I hung up. He left 3 voicemails over the next 2 days. In one, he said, "You are being emotional." In another, he said, "We are trying to protect your future employability." In the third, he said, "This can all be fixed if you stop escalating." I saved all 3. On Monday, June 10th, I got my full benefits file in person, 212 pages. Candace Weller had paper-clipped the review packet separately for me, which I appreciated in a way she will never know. Inside that packet was a cover sheet from the fraud review office with internal notes. Most of it was boring. Referral received, attachments reviewed, medical discrepancy alleged, but one line jumped out. Reporting party requested confidentiality due to family retaliation. Family retaliation, as if I were the threat. I also saw that the complaint had included not just photos and the typed statement, but a copy of a church volunteer schedule with my name on a setup team from April. Someone had used that to suggest I could not be mobility limited because I had volunteered to help decorate a fellowship hall. The schedule had my mother's handwriting on it, not because she signed it, because she always made her sevens with a crossbar and wrote lowercase y with a sharp angle like a check mark. I had stared at grocery lists from that handwriting for 20 years. I knew it the way people know the shape of their own kitchen. Still, I wanted something stronger than recognition. So I went somewhere I had not expected to go. Now let me take you back to Wednesday, June 12th at 1:50 p.m. to the office of Reed and Talbot Business Services on Main Street in Cedar Falls. The whole building smelled like toner, dust, and peppermint gum. I was there because my mother had once asked me to format a church donor mailing list on her home laptop, and I remembered that she used a local print shop and copy service for official-looking things. The woman at the front desk was named Colleen. She did not know me. I asked if they kept customer job records and upload logs. She said yes for 30 days on cloud jobs and 90 on in-store workstation prints. I asked whether anyone named Elaine Bennett had printed image documents there on May 21st. She said she could not tell me. Reasonable. So I asked a better question. I said if the county review unit requested confirmation of whether a specific file was uploaded from your kiosk on that date, would you have it? She said, yes. I wrote that down too. This is what fighting back looked like. Not dramatic, just one better question after another. That afternoon, I sent the county review unit a packet labeled Contradictions. It included Dr. Kwan's updated letter, my physical therapy attendance sheet, witness statements from Jenna, Denise, and Hannah, screenshots of my father's voicemails, and a written request that the review unit verify the source of the submitted images, because the complaint appeared to include statements from direct family members while being marked anonymous. I also attached one page called Specific False Claims. Claim: ran 5-kilometer race in April 2024. Response: false. Attached work logs and medical follow-up on April 13th, the date of the local river run. Claim: worked cash cleaning jobs. Response: false. Attached payroll and school attendance. Claim: no mobility aid use. Response: false. Attached treatment notes documenting intermittent cane use. I kept it plain. No speeches, no adjectives, just false and not false. 3 weeks passed. That is how long it took them to erase me on paper. On Tuesday, July 2nd, at 9:07 a.m., I was icing my hip before leaving for a makeup clinic shift when the review unit called to schedule an in-person reassessment. They wanted me to come in on July 9th with updated medical records and to answer questions about the complaint. I said yes. My mother texted me an hour later. Funny how she knew there was movement. Her message read, "We are praying that truth prevails. It would be wise to present yourself honestly this time." I took a screenshot and did not respond. The reassessment took place in a county annex building on East 4th Street with fluorescent lights so bright they made everybody look sick. The waiting chairs were hard plastic. There was a vending machine humming in the corner and a framed poster about fraud with smiling stock photo faces under the words "Report Abuse." A woman named Tasha Bell came out at 10:11 a.m. and called my name. She was maybe 40, navy blouse, low heels, no nonsense braid over one shoulder. Not unkind, just exact. I remember the click of her badge against the conference room table when she sat down. She said, "I am with the County Fraud and Eligibility Review Team. I want to be very clear about something. You are here because a complaint was made. My job is to compare records. That is all." It was the first honest sentence I had heard from an institution in weeks. I handed her my binder. She looked at the tabs and said, "You organized this yourself?" Yes, she nodded once. Approval, maybe, or surprise. For 74 minutes, she asked careful questions. Could I explain my mobility day to day? Why did some photos show no cane? Did I volunteer at church? Did I receive any cash income? Had I ever told anyone I exaggerated symptoms? Did I know who might have filed the report? I answered every question the same way, briefly, with dates. Then I said the reporting party was not anonymous. They wanted to look anonymous. That got her attention. I slid over the page with my mother's quote from the complaint and the matching statement from my aunt about once the state sees what we sent. I showed her the photo metadata. I showed her the church kitchen statement. I showed her the text from my mother after the reassessment was scheduled. Tasha did not react much, but she started writing faster. Then she asked, "Do your parents receive any financial support from you?" I said, "Not now." She looked up. "Not now." I said, "Until April, my mother had access to my online banking because she helped me set it up after the accident, and I was too tired to think clearly. She used to tell me to transfer $300 or $400 when they needed groceries or utilities. She called it house help from the benefits because I lived with them for part of that time." Tasha said, "Do you have records?" I almost laughed. Of course I had records. I opened the banking folder on my laptop and showed her transfers from my checking account to my mother's account over 11 months. $320, $280, $400, $150, little amounts that become a shape when you line them up. Total, $4,640. I said I moved out on April 1st and changed the password that night. They filed the fraud report 7 weeks later. Tasha went still for a second, not the shocked kind, the confirmed kind. She asked for copies of everything. When I got back to my car, the steering wheel was hot enough to sting. I sat there with the air blasting and let myself shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then I drove to clinic. That evening, I got a call from my cousin Mariah. She had been another silent one. She said, "I should have told you earlier. Mom said not to get involved." I said, "Told me what?" She took a breath. "On May 20th, your mom asked me to send any photos from my bridal shower where you were standing." I asked why, she said, and I remember this exactly, because Nicole is about to learn that limping in public has consequences. I wrote it down while she was talking. Mariah sent me the original text chain from my mother. In one message, my mother wrote, "Make sure there are some where she is carrying things. We need honest context." Honest context. That text became the hinge of everything. If you have ever been in the middle of building your own rescue while still trying to make rent, eat, and show up to work like your life is not on fire, I want to say this clearly. You're not weak for being tired. You're doing two lives at once. And right after Mariah sent that text chain, the county got the one thing my parents could not charm their way around. On Thursday, July 18th at 3:33 p.m., Tasha Bell called me. She said, "I cannot discuss final findings by phone yet, but I need one clarification. Did your parents' home internet account list West Briar Lane as the service address in May?" I said yes. She said thank you. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a full minute. Tessa called me that night, and when I repeated the question, she said, "They subpoenaed the upload log or got voluntary confirmation from the print service. That means they are tracing origin points." Again, she was not a lawyer, she just understood how systems leave tracks. By then, my parents had started working the social side. Women from church stopped making eye contact. One deacon's wife told my Aunt Denise she hoped I got the help I needed. My father told my brother Aaron that I was punishing our parents because they had set adult boundaries. Aaron, who had spent most of his life floating above conflict like it was weather, finally called me on July 21st and said, "I think they really believe they're helping you." I said then, "Why did they ask for my standing photos and not the ones with my cane?" He had no answer. 3 days later, he texted me a screenshot from our family group chat. My mother had written, "Nicole is trying to criminalize concern." My father responded, "Truth has a way of surviving theatrics." I saved that too. On Monday, August 5th at 9:20 a.m., the official determination arrived. The review unit found the complaint unsupported. My benefits were reinstated retroactively. The $8,916 overpayment claim was withdrawn. My transportation eligibility was restored with no interruption to long-term status. The letter also said the matter had been referred internally for review of knowingly false third-party submissions. I read that sentence 12 times, then I cried, not because I was surprised, because I was tired. But that was not the end. It should have been enough. For a normal family, it would have been enough. They would have gone quiet, maybe pretended nothing happened, maybe sent one of those slippery apology texts that says everyone was hurt. My parents escalated instead. On Sunday, August 11th, there was a fundraiser at Grace Fellowship for the roof replacement. Pulled pork, silent auction, sheet cakes, folding tables with mason jars full of raffle tickets. The fellowship hall smelled like barbecue sauce, coffee, and floor wax. My mother was there in a coral blouse taking bids on themed gift baskets like she had not spent the summer trying to cut off my income. I had not planned to go, then Aunt Denise called Saturday night and said, "You should be there at 6:30. Just trust me." I asked why. She said, "Because not all silence lasts forever." So I went. I wore black slacks, a cream blouse, and I brought a folder I had been keeping for 11 months. Not because I planned to wave it around, just because I wanted the weight of it in my hands. At 6:42 p.m., my mother was standing near the dessert table telling two women that certain young people confuse accountability with persecution when a woman I had seen only once before walked through the side door carrying a Navy portfolio. Tasha Bell. She was not there for church. She was there because Grace Fellowship was listed as the source of one of the volunteer schedule attachments in the false report. And apparently someone from the church office had been contacted as part of the internal review. The pastor had agreed to let her speak privately with whoever needed to hear it. Only nothing in a church hall stays private for long. Pastor Wayne Foster, who had spent the whole summer trying not to choose sides, stepped up with the cordless microphone and said, "Before we continue with the raffle drawing, Ms. Bell from the county needs to clarify a matter related to misuse of church materials." The room changed, 40, maybe 50 people turned. I was standing beside the lemonade dispenser. I could smell sliced citrus and bleach from the mop bucket by the kitchen door. My mother set down a paper plate with a lemon bar on it and smiled that polite, prepared smile she uses when she thinks she can steer a situation. Tasha opened her portfolio. She did not look at me first. She looked at Pastor Foster, then at the church office administrator, then at my parents. And she said, in the same neutral tone she had used in the county annex, the false disability fraud complaint submitted on May 21st regarding Nicole Bennett was traced to source materials provided by immediate family members, including images requested by Elaine Bennett and uploaded from an internet connection registered to Martin Bennett at West Briar Lane. Nobody moved. Then she added, because she was exact, and because exact people are a gift. The reporting party also omitted relevant medical records while simultaneously receiving $4,640 in transfers from Ms. Bennett during the eligibility period. Those records have been referred for recovery review. That was the sentence. That was the one. Not emotional, not theatrical, just true in a room that had been built to hold casseroles in denial. The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. My mother said, very quietly, "That is not an appropriate setting." Tasha replied, "I was asked to confirm misuse of church documents. I have done that." My father tried one sentence. "This is a misunderstanding." Tasha closed the portfolio and said, "No, sir, it is not. I will remember that for the rest of my life." My Aunt Denise sat down hard in a metal chair like her knees had given out. Hannah covered her mouth. Mrs. Albright from County Intake looked at the floor. Pastor Foster, who had spent months avoiding clarity, finally found some. He said into the microphone, "Elaine and Martin, I need both of you to step out with me and Deacon Russell. Now." My mother did not cry. She did not confess. She picked up her handbag, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the side office with my father half a step behind her. Exactly the way they had walked into parent-teacher conferences when I was little, and I knew I would somehow come out guilty. Only this time I did not follow. I stayed where I was. Mariah came to stand beside me first. Then Jenna, who had come with Hannah because apparently women talk and thank God for that. Then Aunt Denise, who took my hand and said, "I should have opened my mouth in May." I said, "You did now." Pastor Foster came back out 12 minutes later. 12 exact minutes. He announced that the Bennetts would no longer be handling any church administrative materials or volunteer scheduling until further notice. 3 days after that, the church board removed my mother from the benevolence committee and my father from the finance counting rotation. That mattered to them more than almost anything. Respectability had been their home address for years. A week later, I got a letter from the county recovery office. They had reviewed the transfers my parents took, while claiming to report me out of concern. because some of those transfers had been framed by my mother in messages as needed from your monthly disability, and because the false report had been filed after I cut off access, the county referred the matter for restitution review tied to improper benefit diversion. Again, plain language. What it meant was this. My parents were ordered to repay $4,640. Not maybe, not symbolically, with a payment schedule and dates. My mother called once after that from a number I did not know. I answered because I was in line at Target and distracted. She said, "You have humiliated us over a misunderstanding." I looked at the shelves of dish soap and paper towels and thought about how many ordinary places your life can split in two. I said, "No, you tried to take my income because I changed my bank password." She inhaled sharply like I had said something uncivil. Then she said, "You are enjoying this." I said, "I am paying my rent." And I hung up. My father never called again. He mailed one letter in September. 3 pages, cream stationery. He wrote that family should not be exposed to public embarrassment, that my mother had acted from concern distorted by stress, and that I was allowing bureaucrats and outsiders to define private matters. He did not deny the report. He did not deny the money. He objected to witnesses. That letter told me everything I needed to know. Now let me take you back to Friday, October 4th at 7:10 p.m. to my apartment on West 4th Street. The window was cracked because the weather had finally cooled. Somebody outside was grilling onions and the whole courtyard smelled sweet and smoky. I was sitting at my little second-hand table with my laptop open, paying bills with money that was actually mine. My benefits had been restored for 2 months by then. I was working more hours at Mercy One because my body had stabilized enough for it, and because my supervisor Jenna had gone to bat for me when attendance got messy in June. I had also changed every password, removed every shared login, locked my credit reports just out of caution, and replaced the spare key my mother still swore she did not have. A few things happened quietly after the church fundraiser. The print service on Main Street confirmed to the county that image files matching the complaint attachments had been uploaded from their self-serve kiosk on May 21st using a login tied to Elaine Bennett's email address. The internet provider confirmed the upload of the final report packet came from the home account at West Briar Lane. The church office administrator confirmed my mother had requested a copy of the volunteer schedule for a scrapbook project. Mariah provided the text chain about needing photos where I was standing. Hannah confirmed the church kitchen conversation. Aunt Denise confirmed the "once the state sees what we sent" line. It was never one dramatic clue. It was a quilt of ordinary facts. That is what truth usually is. If you are listening to this and thinking, "I wish I had documented earlier," I want to tell you something I had to learn the ugly way. Late evidence is still evidence. The folder you start after the damage matters too. And there's one more piece of this story you need to hear because winning does not mean it turns into something tender. In November, my brother Aaron asked if I would meet him for coffee at Cup of Joe on College Street. It was sleeting outside. Everybody who came in smelled like wet wool and cold air. He looked wrecked. He said our parents were fighting about money because the church removal had hit them socially and practically. My mother's small bookkeeping side work had dried up after people stopped trusting her with records. My father had been taken off the volunteer finance rotation, which sounds minor unless you know how much he loved being seen as the reliable man who counted offerings and signed reconciliation sheets. They were making restitution payments of $300 a month. The amount irritated them because it was specific. You cannot spiritualize $300 leaving your account every month. Aaron stirred his coffee for too long and said, "Mom says you could stop this if you told them to." I said, "No, I could not." He said she keeps saying family should handle family. I looked at him and said that was her chance in May. He cried a little then. Not for me. Exactly for the collapse of the version of our parents he had preferred to keep. I did not comfort him much. Maybe that sounds cold. But there is a point where being the reasonable daughter becomes another unpaid job. By December, I had blocked both of my parents everywhere except email. Not because I was hoping for some thoughtful reckoning, because if they said anything useful, I wanted it in writing. On Christmas Eve, my mother sent one line. "I hope one day you understand what pressure does to a parent." I did understand. Pressure does not make you fabricate a 5-kilometer race, crop out a cane, ask for pictures where your daughter is standing, send an anonymous report from your own house, and then call it concern. Character does that. Pressure just removes the curtains. I did not reply. The last official update came on January 14th, 2025. A county recovery clerk named Stephen Morales emailed me to confirm restitution payments had begun and that no further action was required from me unless I wanted copies from my records. Of course I wanted copies from my records. He sent them at 3:41 p.m. I printed the email, hole-punched it, and put it in the front of the binder. My mother had said, "She's been faking that limp for years to live off the state." What it cost her was specific. She lost her church committee role. She lost access to volunteer records. She lost her bookkeeping clients. My father lost his finance position at church. Together, they were ordered to repay $4,640 they had taken while trying to cut off the benefits that made me independent enough to leave. Their names are now attached to an internal county fraud referral that will sit in a file long after the gossip gets bored. And me. I kept my housing. I kept my benefits. I kept my job track. I kept the truth in a stack with colored tabs. I wish I could tell you there was a moment where it all felt clean. There was not. Winning like this is not cinematic. It is administrative. It is seeing your rent clear. It is opening a letter without shaking. It is hearing your own body described accurately in a record after months of being turned into somebody else's story. I have not forgiven them. Maybe that will disappoint some people. It does not disappoint me. I answer no unknown calls after 9 p.m. I still tense when I see a county envelope at family events. If I attend them at all, I park where I cannot be blocked in. I do not leave my purse unattended in their house because I do not go in their house. I meet my brother in public. I keep screenshots in duplicate. These are not dramatic boundaries. They are practical ones. My life is good now, better than they wanted it to be. I moved in March to a brighter apartment with fewer stairs. I bought a sturdier cane with a blue floral handle instead of the ugly gray pharmacy one, because if I'm going to need it, I'm at least going to choose it. Jenna helped me apply for a full-time position starting this summer. Dr. Kwan still documents everything with the thoroughness of a woman who has seen too many patients doubted by lazy people. Tessa still texts me, "Save that," whenever anything weird happens. Aunt Denise sends me tulip bulbs and apology in the form of practical care, which is the only kind I trust now. Sometimes people ask if I miss my parents. I miss the idea of having them. That is different. The actual people I had were willing to cut off $1,486 a month from their own daughter, trigger an $8,916 repayment threat, and call it honesty because I stopped transferring money into their account. Once you know that about someone, you know it forever. But I also know this. They tried to turn institutions into weapons because they thought paperwork scared me more than they did. They were wrong.